HOA Karen destroyed playground. Slide sued and fined $171,000. The sun was barely up when the sound of grinding metal echoed through Maplewood Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood where kids usually laughed and chased each other around the playground. But that morning, the air was thick with something else: anger, disbelief, and the kind of tension that makes your stomach knot. Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, had just done the unthinkable. Karen had always been a force, striding through the neighborhood with her clipboard and a permanent scowl, ready to slap a fine on anyone who dared leave a bike on their lawn or paint their mailbox a shade too bright. She wasn't just strict, she was a walking manifesto of control, her voice sharp enough to cut through any excuse. Rules are rules. She'd snap, her eyes glinting with the thrill of power. But this time, she'd gone too far. Way too far. It started with the playground slide, a bright red, twisting structure that had been the heart of Maplewood's community park for years. Kids called it the Dragon because of how it curved and swooped, delivering them to the ground with a satisfying thud. Parents loved it too. It was a rare spot where their kids could burn energy without a screen. But Karen, she hated it. It's an eyesore. She'd complained at every HOA meeting, her voice dripping with disdain. Too loud, too garish, and probably unsafe. No one took her seriously at first. The slide was inspected yearly, sturdy as ever. But Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about winning. The trouble began when Karen, without consulting the HOA board, decided the slide had to go. She claimed it was a liability and hired a shady contractor she found on some sketchy website to inspect it. The guy, a greasy-haired man named Mitch who smelled like cheap cigars, showed up with a sledgehammer and a grin. By noon, the Dragon was a pile of splintered plastic and twisted metal, the playground reduced to a graveyard of childhood memories. Kids stood at the edge of the park, clutching their parents' hands, eyes wide with shock. Parents whispered furiously, their phones already buzzing with texts. Karen did this. I was there that morning, a single dad named Tom, pushing my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, on the swings when the demolition started. The sound of that first sledgehammer swing hit like a gunshot. I froze, watching as Mitch swung again, the slide buckling under his blows. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her voice small. Daddy, why are they breaking the Dragon? I didn't have an answer. All I could feel was a slow burn in my chest, the kind that comes when someone takes something pure and stomps on it. Word spread fast. By afternoon, a crowd had gathered: parents, kids, even old Mr. Jenkins, who usually stayed glued to his porch. Karen stood by the wreckage, arms crossed, her chin tilted up like she'd just won a war. This is for the good of the community, she declared, her voice carrying that smug certainty that made my blood boil. That slide was a danger. You'll thank me later. Thank you, Sarah, a young mom with fire in her eyes stepped forward, her toddler clinging to her leg. My son broke his arm falling off his bike. Not that slide, you had no right. The crowd murmured in agreement, their anger building like a storm. Karen didn't flinch. I'm the HOA president, she said, as if that explained everything. I make the tough calls. That's when the twist came, unexpected and sharp. Mitch, the contractor, who'd been leaning against his truck, suddenly piped up. Lady, you didn't pay me yet." His voice was loud, almost gleeful, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Heads turned. Karen's face flushed red. "We'll discuss that later," she hissed. But Mitch wasn't done. "You told me to make it quick and don't ask questions. Said it was your call. I got it all in text." He held up his phone, smirking, and the crowd went silent. Karen's own words about to betray her. The tension exploded that evening at an emergency HOA meeting, held in the community center's stuffy meeting room. Every chair was filled, and people stood along the walls, arms crossed, faces grim. Karen sat at the head of the table, her usual confidence cracking like thin ice. Sarah, now the unofficial leader of the opposition, stood up and read from a petition signed by 80% of the neighborhood. "We demand Karen step down and pay for the slide's replacement," she said, her voice steady but shaking with emotion. She acted alone, without approval, and destroyed something our kids loved. Karen tried to defend herself, her voice shrill. "I was protecting you. That slide was a lawsuit waiting to happen." But then Mitch, who'd shown up uninvited, sauntered in, still holding his phone. "Want to see the text," he said, grinning. He projected them onto the wall, Karen's messages, clear as day. "Just tear it down. Don't tell anyone. I'll handle the fallout." The room erupted. Parents shouted, kids cried, and Karen's face went pale. She'd been caught, not just in a mistake, but in a power trip that had cost the community something irreplaceable. The high point came when Tommy stood up, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "Karen, you didn't just break a slide. You broke trust. My daughter hasn't stopped crying since this morning. She keeps asking why the dragon is gone. What do I tell her? That you decided her happiness didn't matter?" The room went quiet, the weight of my words sinking in. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had nothing to say. The fallout was swift and brutal. The HOA board, pressured by the petition and Mitch's damning evidence, voted unanimously to remove Karen as president. But that wasn't enough for the neighborhood. Sarah, who turned out to have a cousin who was a lawyer, organized a class action lawsuit against Karen for property damage and emotional distress. The slide's destruction wasn't just a loss of plastic, it was a loss of community, of memories, of a place where kids felt safe. The lawsuit demanded $170,000 to cover replacement costs, legal fees, and punitive damages. In court, Karen's defense crumbled. She tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, but Mitch's texts and the testimony of dozens of parents painted a clear picture. Karen had acted alone, driven by ego and a need to control. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp gaze, didn't hold back. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "you abused your authority and caused measurable harm. This isn't just about a slide, it's about a community's trust." The gavel came down, and Karen was ordered to pay the full $170,000. Gasps filled the courtroom. Karen's face was a mask of shock, her hands trembling as she gripped her purse. The aftermath was bittersweet. The money would replace the slide, and a new one bigger, brighter, and dubbed Dragon 2.0 by the kids was already in the works. The neighborhood rallied, with parents volunteering to oversee the project to ensure no one like Karen could hijack it again. But the scars remained. Lily still asked about the dragon, her trust in adults a little shakier. Sarah became the new HOA president, her first act being to install a transparent approval process for any major decisions. Karen, meanwhile, became a ghost in Maplewood. Her house went up for sale a month after the ruling, her reputation in tatters. Whispers followed her about how she'd tried to appeal the fine, only to be shut down by the judge again. Some said she'd moved to another state, hoping to start over. Others said she was still lurking, too stubborn to leave. Either way, her reign was over, and the neighborhood felt lighter without her shadow. As Dragon 2.0 rose in the playground, kids ran around it, their laughter louder than ever. But the story of Karen and the slide lingered, a cautionary tale about power, pride, and the cost of thinking you're above everyone else. What do you think was justice served, or did Karen deserve a second chance? Share your thoughts. This neighborhood story is far from over.